Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we really dig into a significant career, look at all the pieces, the source material, and try to map out, the definitive story. Not just what someone did, but maybe get closer to why.
Exactly. And today we're diving into Neal Brennan. He's this real architect of modern comedy, someone who went from co-creating maybe one of the most impactful sketch shows ever.
You mean Chappelle show?
Right, Chappelle's show, obviously. But he moved from that to becoming this, incredibly unique voice of really intense self-reflection.
Yeah, and I think if Chappelle's show is all, you're missing, well, maybe the most interesting part of his career. Right.
Totally. So our mission today is to trace that path. How did he go from that high-pressure writer's room dealing with all that racial satire to standing alone on stage with shows like Three Mics or Blocks, using these really rigid structures?
It's a story about collaboration, huge collaboration that kind of imploded spectacularly.
Yeah, and maybe forced him towards needing absolute creative control just so he could talk about his, deepest vulnerabilities.
So for you listening, we're unpacking someone whose work hits pretty much every major comedy outlet. Neal Brennan, American comedian, writer, director, producer, podcaster, born back in '73, Villanova, Pennsylvania.
And yeah, the initial fame, it's all Chappelle's show, co-writing that from 2003 to 2006. But the work that really defines him now?
It's got to be Three Mics, right? That Netflix special from 2017.
I think so. And what just jumps out right away is the sheer range. He's not just a stand-up. He's doing TV, he's doing film.
And the types of comedy.
All over the map. You get observational stuff, surreal humor, sketch comedy, which, okay, we expect that after Chappelle's show.
Sure.
But then there's black comedy, blue comedy, really sharp satire. He's using, every tool he has.
And the topics he covers mirror that whole journey. Early on, it's the big external stuff. American politics, pop culture, racism, race relations, drug use, sexuality.
Yeah.
Standard comedian fare, kinda.
But then there's this huge shift, like a gravitational pull inward in his later work. It becomes intensely focused on mental health.
It's really focused. Using his own struggles as the actual material for his arguably most powerful art.
And that's the pivot we want to understand in this deep dive. How do you go from writing for, Nickelodeon's Kenan and Kel
right,
to directing specials about a 25-year fight with clinical depression and talking about trying ayahuasca or transcranial magnetic stimulation?
That's not just a career change. It feels like something deeper, almost like a necessary transformation born out of, well, maybe trauma.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start at the beginning.
Right. To get the guy who needs 3 separate microphones on stage, you kind of need to look at where he came from. Youngest of 10 kids?
10, in an Irish Catholic family.
Yeah, grew up in Villanova, PA, then moved to Wilmette, Illinois when he was about 6. That big family dynamic, it immediately makes you think loud, probably competitive.
Oh, definitely chaotic, you'd imagine. Being the youngest of 10, especially in that kind of family, getting noticed probably meant you had to be the funniest or the quickest.
So comedy wasn't just a hobby. It was maybe baked into the family environment.
Seems like it. We know his dad's side of the family and his 5 older brothers were all described as just funny. Humor was probably, like you said, a survival tool, a way to connect in that house.
And he figured this out pretty early on. Around 8 or 9, he already knew he was funny. And he wasn't just telling knock-knock jokes.
No, he was trying to mimic David Brenner, Richard Lewis, Jerry Seinfeld for his classmates. I think about that.
That's pretty advanced for a kid. He wasn't going for easy laughs. He was already drawn to structure, observation, insight, even then.
And that foundation connects directly to the person who really showed him it could be a career. His older brother, Kevin Brennan.
Right. Kevin was already doing stand-up and writing while Neal was still in high school.
Exactly. So Neal had this blueprint right there in the family. He'd spend weekends going into New York City, watching Kevin perform at the Improv.
Soaking it all in.
Totally. And he's backstage, meeting guys who would become huge names. Dave Attell, David Jusko, Ray Romano, Mike Royce. He's seeing the whole scene up close as a teenager.
That must have been incredible exposure.
Yeah, and he said later that watching his brother, seeing him actually do it, made him realize, oh, you can actually make a living from this. It wasn't just some far-off dream. It was a real job possibility.
And that realization seems to have lit a fire under him.
Definitely, because his next move was a big commitment. Moves to New York, enrolls in film school at NYU.
But doesn't last long.
Nope, drops out after just 1 year. It's like, why study the theory when the real thing is happening right down the street? He needed to be in it.
Which leads to that first crucial, maybe unglamorous job.
Yeah, doorman. At the Boston Comedy Club in Greenwich Village, it's gone now, but back then, it was a hub.
It wasn't fancy, but it put him right there. Proximity.
And that proximity paid off almost immediately. Dave Chappelle was performing there all the time.
And they hit it off.
Instantly, apparently. Became friends fast. And Brennan, this kid working the door, starts pitching jokes to Chappelle.
Wow. Straight from checking IDs to, like, contributing material.
Yeah, he was already thinking like a collaborator. And he was fully immersed. We know he shared an apartment with Jay Moore around then, too. Just living and breathing New York comedy.
That environment sounds intense. It creates the opportunity, sure, but also the pressure must have been immense.
Huge pressure. And that pressure leads to his first big creative setback. A failure that really knocked him back.
Okay, let's talk about that first time on stage. 1992, he's 18, gets up to do stand-up.
And just crickets. He said he got no laughs. Nothing.
Ugh, that's gotta hurt.
Devastatingly, it seems. Because that one night of silence from the crowd, it apparently shut him down completely. He stopped doing stand-up for 5 whole years.
5 years. Just from one bad set.
That's the story. 5 years of silence on stage. It shows how deeply that rejection hit him.
So if you can't perform, you retreat to what you can control, which for him was
writing. Yeah, he needed another way in. And interestingly, his first writing gigs weren't even straight comedy. He wrote for The Source magazine in '92.
the hip-hop magazine.
Yeah, which is fascinating, right? Shows he was already tuned into that cultural frequency, the stuff that would later become so central to Chappelle's show. #Tag3, early career, and the birth of a cult classic.
Okay, so performing is on hold. He focuses on writing, moves out to L.A. in the mid-90s, and this is where he starts getting those, like, foundational TV writing jobs.
Right, the dues-paying gigs. He wrote for Singled Out, remember that? With Jenny McCarthy and Chris Hardwick.
Vaguely. 1995. Then it looks like a string of kids or teen-focused shows.
Yeah, the game show Blizz in '96, then the Nickelodeon sketch show, all that for a bit.
Oh, that was big.
Yeah, '96, '97, and then the sitcom Keenan and Kel in '97.
These might seem like, just credits on a resume, but they're actually really important, aren't they?
Absolutely crucial. Writing for those kinds of shows forces you to learn structure. You need rapid-fire punchlines, clear character voices, hitting time cues precisely.
All the mechanics.
Exactly. The content might have been, safe and for kids, but he was building the technical toolkit, learning how to structure comedy. Even if it was chaos, he'd structure later.
And that technical skill then gets combined with that old friendship with Chappelle.
Right. They reconnect for their first really big swing together.
Yeah.
The movie Half-Baked.
They co-wrote the script. It comes out January 1998. This feels like a huge moment for both of them, moving from clubs and TV writing to a feature film.
Massive opportunity. But the movie didn't land. Not at first, anyway.
Now it's a cult classic, especially for, a certain audience.
Oh, completely. It's iconic now. But back then, it was pretty much panned by critics, and it failed commercially. The irony is thick, considering its legacy now.
And that initial failure wasn't just like a bad box office report. It hit them hard.
Really hard. Brennan himself called that period, the time around the film's release, probably the worst year of my life, creatively and personally.
Wow. Worst year of my life.
Yeah.
That's heavy. He poured himself into this big collaboration, and it just fell apart.
And it wasn't just the project. It apparently wrecked their friendship, too, at least for a while. Chappelle described the aftermath. He said it was like leaving a crime scene.
Leaving a crime scene. That tells you everything about the emotional fallout.
Yeah, they lost touch completely after that. So for you listening, you have to clock this moment. This is maybe the first major sign that, for Brennan, deep collaboration comes with this massive risk of trauma. It really sets the table for why he might crave more control later on.
Yeah, the lesson seems to be, when you pour everything into a shared project, you share the failure just as deeply. It wasn't just the movie that failed. Their partnership kind of died with it, temporarily.
Which makes the fact that they got back together for Chappelle's show even more remarkable, really.
It really is. They somehow managed to take that half-baked disaster and channel it. They regrouped to co-create, co-write, and co-executive produce this sketch show. Premiered January 2003.
And you can almost see the lessons learned from Half-Baked and how they approached it. They were meticulous. They actually read that book, Live from New York, The Oral History of SNL.
Right, like studying the masters.
Yeah, looking for guidance, structure. They weren't just winging it. They were trying to build something solid.
And they had this pact, right?
Yeah.
About the writing.
Yeah, a really important creative pact. They wrote almost everything themselves, very few outside writers. But the key part was they agreed never to reveal who wrote which specific sketch.
Why do that?
Well, maybe it wasn't just about being humble. It created this shared ownership, maybe as a shield. A way to avoid the kind of blame or sole responsibility that might have hurt them after Half-Baked. Protect the partnership.
A unified front.
Yeah.
Especially important given the kind of material they were doing.
Exactly. And Brennan wasn't just writing, he was directing too. He directed some really major sketches in season 2, including
The Rick James sketch.
The Rick James sketch, yeah. Which people sometimes forget he directed.
That sketch is legendary. But it's also pure chaos on screen. Directing that must have required incredible control.
For sure. High energy, multiple moving parts, Chappelle giving that iconic performance. Brennan had to orchestrate all of that. And he got recognition for it, 3 Emmy noms in 2004. Director, writer, producer.
And the show itself just exploded. By the end of season 2, it wasn't just popular.
It was huge. Comedy Central's highest rated show. It was the show everyone was talking about. It was shaping language, culture, comedy itself.
You couldn't escape it.
And its influence even spread to music. The Roots were the music directors for seasons 2 and 3.
That's cool.
And here's a little tidbit showing Brennan's connections. He later recommended the Roots to Jimmy Fallon for late night.
No way. So he helped make that happen.
Apparently so. Shows he was thinking about the whole ecosystem, connecting talent.
Okay, so peak success. Everything's going amazingly well. Chappelle signs this massive deal in 2004, right? Like $50 million for 2 more seasons.
$50 million. They were on top of the world. Peak security, peak success.
And then it all just collapses again.
Yeah, just like Half-Baked, but on a much, much bigger scale. Sudden, traumatic, and completely out of Brennan's control, it seems. April 2005, Chappelle just walks away.
Before season 3 even premieres.
Right. And here's the part that echoes the Half-Baked aftermath and really reinforces Brennan's later trajectory. Chappelle left without telling Brennan or the crew. Just gone.
Man, imagine that. Your partner, your co-creator on the biggest thing you've ever done just vanishes. The whole $50 million machine grinds to a halt.
That's got to be immense creative trauma. The structure they built, that pact of shared ownership, it couldn't stop this internal implosion. It was totally outside his control.
So what happens? Who cleans up the mess?
Brennan, mostly. The season 3 premiere gets delayed. Comedy Central is freaking out. And it falls to Brennan to basically sift through the wreckage. He compiles the sketches they had shot.
The lost episodes?
Exactly. They finally aired in July 2006. But it's like this heartbreaking epilogue. A professional divorce played out on screen. He's left cleaning up the crime scene again, but this time it's a $50 million one.
That experience has got to fundamentally change how you view collaboration, right? Especially massive, high-stakes collaboration.
How could it not? It seems like the immediate next steps in his career show this real, almost desperate need for autonomy.
Okay, so Chappelle Show implodes. That massive collaboration ends dramatically. What does Brennan do next? It looks like he kind of splits his focus.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. On one hand, he needs to keep working, right? Prove he's still a viable talent in Hollywood, so you see him doing professional directing and high-level writing gigs.
Right, the commodity path, keeping the career going. He directed and co-wrote that TV movie, Totally Awesome, in 2006.
Yeah, and then directed the feature film The Goods, Live Hard, Sell Hard in 2009, showing he could handle a movie set cinematic comedy.
And his directing work continued. He did a bunch of episodes, 10, I think, of Inside Amy Schumer in 2013.
Which is significant, right? Another really successful, structurally interesting sketch show. It shows he hadn't soured on collaboration entirely, but maybe learned how to manage it on a different scale. Smaller, more contained, maybe.
He also kept his hand in as a top-tier joke writer for big events, like the Oscars in 2011. And Seth Meyers' speech at the White House Correspondents' Dinner that same year.
Yeah, those gigs require serious professionalism,
Right.
writing in someone else's voice, hitting specific marks under pressure, skills he honed way back in those early TV jobs.
And he became a regular contributor on The Daily Show starting in 2016. Trevor's friend, Neal.
Right, so all of that directing, writing speeches, The Daily Show, that's the steady professional side, kept him working, kept him relevant. But at the same time, something else was brewing, something totally different.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. Because while he's doing all this high-level Hollywood stuff,
Yeah.
he makes this immediate jump away from that high-pressure TV world,
Yeah.
away from Comedy Central's whole infrastructure.
And dives in.
Podcasting, like early podcasting. Raw, unpolished, totally independent.
Ah, right. The Champs. That started back in 2011, ran till 2016.
With Moshe Kasher and DJ Doug Pound.
Yeah. And that podcast feels like a retreat almost. Low stakes compared to TV, totally unscripted. Just a space to talk and figure things out without network notes or pressure. Complete autonomy.
And the format itself was pretty unique, kind of pushing boundaries in its own way.
Definitely. Moshe Katcher described it as having a rotating black guy guest, a different black guest every week, and Doug Pound would be dropping beats and sound effects.
So it let Brennan keep exploring those themes of race and culture, the stuff from Chappelle's show, but in this loose conversational way, almost like therapy through conversation.
Totally. And they had great guests, Chris Rock, Wayne Brady, the Wayans brothers, Blake Griffin even.
They sometimes went off format too, right? I'd guess like Bobby Lee, Sasha Grey, Jose Canseco.
Yeah, they weren't totally rigid, but the core idea was that deep, funny, sometimes uncomfortable conversation about culture. And it got noticed. LA Weekly named it Best Podcast in 2014.
So what you're seeing here is Brennan finding a medium that values authenticity and gives him that control. The two things that seem to blow up on him in his big PV collaborations.
Exactly. And this intimate, autonomous format, it feels like it's setting the stage perfectly for his next massive creative leap, the stand-up special that would redefine him.
So he explores this unstructured, intimate conversation on the Champs and then pivots hard into creating maybe his most structured work ever.
3 mics, yeah. It feels like the absolute culmination of everything he learned writing, directing, performing, and crucially, using structure to contain really difficult emotional stuff.
He started developing it around 2015, right? Working it out in LA, then took it to New York.
Yeah, ran it at the Lynn Redgrave Theater. And the core idea, the innovation, is just brilliant in its simplicity. 3 microphones on stage.
They're physically separate.
Physically separate. And each one has a very specific, non-negotiable job. It's incredibly rigid.
Okay, break down the 3 mics for us, because the structure is the genius here.
Right. So mic 1, that was purely for reading one-liners off index cards.
Like quick, punchy observational jokes. Bam, bam, bam.
Exactly. Pure joke mechanics. The kind of stuff he admired in Seinfeld and Brenner way back when. Safe, controlled laughs.
Okay, mic 1. One-liners. What about mic 3? Let's skip 2 for a second.
Okay, mic 3. That was for traditional stand-up. Longer stories, bits with a setup, a build, a punchline, more narrative. This uses all that technical skill he built writing for TV shows.
Got it. One-liners, traditional stand-up. So
Yeah.
mic 2, the middle mic.
Mic 2 was the kill shot. That mic was reserved only for talking about the heavy stuff. Dealing with his clinical depression, his really difficult relationship with his dad, deep personal trauma.
It wasn't jokes.
No jokes at mic 2, just raw, painful honesty. Confession, basically.
Oh, so you had these 3 totally different modes right next to each other.
And the brilliance is how the structure forces them together. It stops the show from just becoming a depressing therapy session, but it also prevents it from being just surface-level jokes.
How so?
Because the structure dictates the flow. He has to move between the mics. So a moment of intense, raw pain at mic 2 might be immediately followed by a quick, sharp one-liner at mic 1, or a more structured comedic bit at mic 3.
It creates this emotional whiplash for the audience.
Exactly. Which kind of mirrors the experience of depression itself, right? Dark periods broken up by moments of almost manic observation or forced humor. The structure contains the chaos.
And the audience knows the rules. They know what each mic means.
Right. So they can process the trauma from mic 2 and then laugh at mic 1 or 3 without feeling weird about it. It gives permission. The structure controls the experience for everyone.
When Netflix dropped 3 mics in 2017, it felt like a landmark moment. It cemented him as this really singular artist, not just a writer or director.
Totally. That format, using rigid structure to deliver incredibly vulnerable honesty, it changed the game for what a stand-up special could even be.
And that structural idea, that way of framing vulnerability, it carried over into his next big show, didn't it?
Yeah. Unacceptable. It debuted in New York in August 2021. And significantly, it was directed by Derek DelGaudio.
DelGaudio, the guy behind In and of Itself, the magician storyteller.
The very same. An artist who is all about structure, narrative, and illusion. Bringing him in really underscores Brennan's continued focus on using form to shape the content.
And Unacceptable eventually became the Netflix special, Neal Brennan. Blocks.
Right, released in 2022. And that title change, Blocks, is super indicative. The structure isn't 3 physical mics anymore. It's this concept of psychological blocks, the things that hold us back, the insecurities.
So, still using a clear framework for introspection, just maybe a more somatic one this time. #7, mental health, ayahuasca, and the Blocks podcast.
And this focus on mics, on blocks, it comes from a very real place. A long, hard struggle. Brennan's been open about dealing with depression for, 25 years?
Yeah, 25-year battle. And it wasn't just, taking some pills and getting on with it. He went to extreme lengths to find relief.
25 years. That's most of his adult life defined by this struggle. And yeah, the lengths he went to are pretty extraordinary. He talks about trying all sorts of treatments, including traveling all the way to China.
For TMS, right? Transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Exactly. For anyone listening who doesn't know, TMS is this pretty intense non-drug treatment, uses magnetic fields to stimulate brain activity.
The fact that he flew halfway around the world for this experimental procedure, it really tells you how severe the depression was and how desperate he was for something to work. That desperation must fuel the honesty we see on stage.
Absolutely. And he didn't just keep it private. He was in that YouTube documentary in 2019, Laughing Matters, talking about mental health with other comics. He's consistently used his platform to try and destigmatize this stuff, turning his pain into, well, art and maybe a public service too.
Alongside the medical treatments, there was also this huge spiritual shift happening, right? Which ties into his later podcasting work.
Yeah, this is fascinating. For years, he identified as an atheist. Pretty firmly, it seemed.
But that changed.
Completely. In November 2020, he said he wasn't an atheist anymore. And the reason? He'd used ayahuasca several times.
Whoa. Ayahuasca.
Yeah.
That's a powerful psychedelic, often used for intense spiritual or psychological experiences.
Right. Often in these ritual settings, aimed at profound insights, ego dissolution. For him to go from atheism to embracing something like that, driven by this search for mental peace, it shows this radical reshaping of his whole worldview. He needed structure in his comedy, but maybe transcendence in his personal life.
In this personal evolution, the depression, the search for treatments, the spiritual shift, it all feeds directly back into his podcasting. After the Champs ended, he started How Neal Feel in 2019.
With Bianca Sirabashi. And How Neal Feel feels like a bridge. Still conversational, talking current events, personal lives, interviewing friends, maintaining that intimacy.
But it had structure too, didn't it? Like regular segments.
Yeah, small structures to keep it focused.
Right.
Doc Watch, where they'd discuss documentaries. Neal's Gone Apologize, where he'd apologize for saying something dumb.
Dumb Purchase, emails for listener questions. Even in casual conversation, he's using these little frameworks.
Exactly. But his latest podcast, the Blocks podcast, starting December 2022, that feels like the true synthesis of everything.
Suggested by Jimmy Carr, apparently. And David Letterman was the first guest. That's major league.
Totally. And the format. It directly mirrors his Netflix special, Blocks. He uses that concept, the internal barriers, the insecurities, the things that make us feel isolated or lonely.
He uses that as the actual topic of conversation with his guests.
Precisely. He gets these high-profile, often very guarded people and asks them about their blocks. What isolates them? How do they try to overcome it?
So he took the structure he used for his own vulnerability in 3 Mics and Blocks and turned it into a framework for other people to be vulnerable.
Yes. He transformed his personal coping mechanism into this shared, almost therapeutic platform for public figures. It's brilliant.
And we saw that come full circle, right? There was an episode where Jimmy Carr actually interviewed him.
Yeah, flip the script. And they talk specifically about how ayahuasca had helped Brennan deal with his blocks. So it brings his spiritual journey, his mental health struggles, his core vulnerability right into the show's structure. The block concept became this tool for broader conversation. #TBeth, conclusion and final thought.
Okay, so let's pull this all together. For you listening, what's the big picture here? We followed this really incredible path. Brennan starts as a writer, focused on external stuff, big sketch comedy, massive collaboration with Chappelle's show.
That huge mass market spectacle. And he transitions, or maybe is forced to transition, into this deeply personal, highly experimental, self-directed artist, focused almost entirely inward on introspection.
And the change in his main tools, his mediums, is stark. He basically abandons the shaky ground of network TV collaboration.
Because it burned him. Twice. Badly.
Right. And instead, he finds stability and control on the solitary stand-up stage and in the intimate space of the podcast booth. He swapped the shared writing pact on Chappelle's show for the absolute structural control of 3 Mics. Every word was his, every feeling managed by his rules.
And that structure is everything when it comes to the honesty. His later work, Three Mics, Blocks the Special, Blocks the Podcast, it all uses these formal constraints. The mics, the block concept, they're like scaffolding. They're necessary support beams that allow him to build something out of radical personal honesty about mental health.
It's like the structure isn't there to hide the pain, but to make it manageable, make it artistically coherent.
Exactly. It's calculated vulnerability. The structure gives the audience, and maybe him too, a clear path through the difficult stuff. It stops the rawness from just being overwhelming or shapeless. It provides that necessary frame to discuss really heavy topics like clinical depression and trauma in a way that's still somehow entertaining and definitely insightful.
Which brings us back to that core tension in his creative life. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative question, doesn't it?
I think so.
Considering the commercial failure of Half-Baked, that first big collaboration that damaged his friendship with Chappelle, and then the sudden catastrophic collapse of Chappelle's show, the peak of collaborative success, is Neal Brennan's current success, his resonant later work, fundamentally rooted in avoiding that kind of collaboration? Is it built on the intentional isolation and total creative control he found in his one-man shows and podcasts?
It really suggests that, for him, maybe the answer is yes. His biggest early successes were shared, but they both ended traumatically, seemingly teaching him that trusting his creative fate to others was just too risky.
So his later work becomes almost entirely self-driven, self-written, self-performed, structured by him alone.
Which forces the focus inward. His whole career path seems to argue that, maybe for certain artists dealing with certain kinds of vulnerability, that deep honesty can only truly be accessed and controlled through complete creative autonomy.
Making sure that if it all falls apart again,
He's the only one holding the pieces. He controls the cleanup. No more crime scenes left by others.
from the wild energy of the Rick James sketch to the quiet, structured introspection born from ayahuasca and TMS, that's the journey of Neal Brennan, architect of comedy and architect of his own carefully constructed vulnerability.
A truly fascinating deep dive. Shows how creative trauma can really shape an entire artistic life.
Indeed it does. We've unpacked Neal Brennan,